The Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice. Mr. Spindler, Mr. Herman, if you continue to disrupt this meeting, I will ask you to leave. This is your first and final warning. We've got 2 agenda items in today's regular meeting and 1 agenda item in our special meeting. You want to call the roll?
Sorely, Madam Chair. Rafael with the CLA's office. Ms. Martinez is present. Mr. Krikorian is present. And Mr. O'Farrell is present. You may convene.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and take public comment for general public comment and anyone who filled out cards for our regular meeting. If you haven't done so, I direct you to the kiosk in the back so you can go ahead and fill out a card electronically. First speaker is Herman, followed by Wayne Spindler.
I get 3 minutes?
Woo! Looks like we're caught in an FBI investigation regarding the so-called fraudulent misrepresentation of a class action billing case. Why weren't you paying people their money back like you're supposed to after you put Price Waterhouse and coppers in litigation? You know the kind of reputation those folks have when you got a stupid fake bar license, Mr. Paul Krikorian?
Mr. Herman, stick to items 1, 2, 3.
I'm on item number 3, ma'am. I'm talking about the Paradis Law Group, PLLC, regarding utility solution contract, where some dumb white nigger Jews fucking had this bullshit government steal our water and actually inflate our billing. And now us dumb niggas are here to retaliate with Price Waterhouse coppers because I'm in support. I believe Price Waterhouse deserves more than $1 billion in restitution for the damage the city of Herman Jason Wesson Jr. caused them. Hey, Mr. Koretz is in the house, and Mr. Sadir, thank you. Sit in, Sid. So regarding the faculty's new billing system, I believe it's fucked up. Then in regards to Board of Water Power Commissioner City Attorney's report, fuck the city attorney on the switch station static. Now, and then there's 3 items, that's right. This one's about continue from May 21st. Again, legislation regarding the investor-owned utility powers because these motherfuckers on our infrastructure were stealing our money. Now let me go to general public comment. See, why do you people have to be so foolish to be corrupted? Why? What leads you into this organized way of stealing, fraud, abuse, and taking advantage of public trust? Isn't it apparent that Paul Martin Krikorian's bar license was active at the time when he was calling the shots as a budget advisor? It has everything to do with it because the budget here has to do with energy, climate change, and the fucking Environmental Justice Committee, mommy. So I know what I talk about. When you make it due to difficulties in the language that I interpret based on one order. 42 U.S.C. 1983, and so as long as my flabby arms keep working, I'm going to keep waving them in the air because I'm not the fat cunt going to jail and looking at my children through the bars, bitch.
The next speaker is Wayne Spindler. You're speaking on items 1, 2, and 3 in general public comment. You've got 3 minutes total.
It's right. Here we go. Bad, bad, bad. What you did to my brothers and sisters in Price Waterhouse Coopers. Now, you treated them like niggas. Now they gonna treat you like niggas. So you see, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, play the videos and the audios back. Who told you that the lawsuit against Price Cooper's Waterhouse was a fraud? Raise your hand. It was me the whole time. And I even went to the DWP Commission. Did they listen? No. Did the city attorney listen? No. Did the Department of Justice listen? No. Did the DA listen? No. No nigger listens to niggers, but we listen to the fat cunt. And particularly our ratepayer advocate, Mr. Pickle, was in on the whole scam the entire time and never went to the FBI and confessed this crime. So how did this happen? It happened because the goddamn PricewaterhouseCoopers has very important clients, Miss Martinez, Mr. Koretz. They do bookkeeping for people you don't know. People that do things that are legal, but you have no need to know about. So what did they have to do? They had to establish to their super powerful clientele that they didn't do this. And that's why when they started deposing your attorneys at Paul Martin Krikorian approved with a no-bid contract for attorneys not even licensed in California, they stole $64 million. 24 million sitting over there in New York and 30 in Cleveland, Ohio, where fucking Herman Jason Wesson was born from a fucking egg out of an ass. So, I don't think you're in a position to do that today. Now, what we're going to do is this. We're going to go back into closed session. You're going to admit publicly and apologize to PricewaterhouseCoopers for your fraudulent scheme. You're going to give them liquidated damages of $500 million. Then, what we're going to do is, we're going to finally start seeing the indictments getting unsealed. But there's one more little piece of business, the payoff money. You didn't pick up your payoff money from the two law firms in Ohio and New York. Why don't you go get it? They've got it ready for you. They've got it in briefcases. All you have to do is go to LAX and pick it up. It's there. It's right there. Why? So there's federal agents looking at it. I say you can grab the bag and flee to Mexico. Go for it. And now for my general comment.
It was 2 minutes.
No, my general public comment, my general public comment.
3 minutes,
Mr. You gave him 3 minutes. You gave me 2 minutes.
He
Did I
did
get
his
2 minutes?
items and his one general public comment. Thank you very much. Your time
Did I
is over.
get,
No,
they bunched me?
I repeated, you had 2 minutes.
No.
for your items and your 1 minute of general public comment. Thank you. Anyone else? I only have 2 speakers on the regular agenda item. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, let's go ahead and take up item number, well, before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and move that item number 2 go on consent. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that will be the order. Can we go ahead and read item number 1 into the record?
Certainly. Item number 1 relates to motion Martinez-Smith relative to potential state legislation related to mitigating wildfires caused by investor-owned utilities power infrastructure.
All right, thank you. Can we have all the department DWP come forward? So we've heard this, members, this item was heard in May, and since then it appears that the legislation in Sacramento has taken some sort of action. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and hear from you, and then we'll hear from the members.
Okay. So as you mentioned at the May 21st meeting, we presented information relative to the current status of wildfire discussions in Sacramento. Since then, the governor has signed AB 1054 and AB 111, whereby both bills together will address some issues relative to catastrophic wildfires in California. Recall in May, we also talked about the governor had signed SB 901, September 21st of 2018. That addressed a number of issues relative to wildfire prevention, response and recovery, fuel reduction, forestry policies, cost recovery by IOUs, and wildfire mitigation plans. SB 901 mandated POUs, including LADWP, prepare a wildfire mitigation plan by January 2020 and annually thereafter. The plan was to consider a number of factors. If you recall, we mentioned disabling reclosures, plan performance, notifying customers, as well as vegetation management. We spent some time talking about DWP's vegetation management. It's a very robust program. We maintain a database of over 400,000 trees, and we prune about 185,000 trees per year. The plan at that time, as contemplated in SB 901, had to be presented publicly to the board, had to be evaluated by a qualified independent evaluator, et cetera. So fast forward to July 12, 2019. The governor did sign the legislation, as I mentioned. It established a couple new things: the California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board, the Wildfire Safety Division within the CPUC, until the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety is established. It also established that particular office, and it needs to be up and running by July 1st, 2021. It also established, most importantly, an IOU, Investor-Owned Utility Wildfire Fund, to pay eligible claims. And again, it reiterated that POUs, i.e. LADWP, must still submit a wildfire plan. That plan now must be submitted to the California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board by July 2020, and then submit annual updates and comprehensive revisions every 3 years. It was an urgency measure. It took effect immediately. So it's important to note that while a number of things were accomplished, the only real impact on LADWP at this time is that we must submit the wildfire mitigation plan to the new California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. They will provide advice and recommendations, not mandates. And again, as I mentioned, we already had to prepare such plan as it related to SB 901. During this time, there was a lot of discussion. If you recall, a task force was formed, and there was some discussion, if you will, about California's application of inverse condemnation to utilities. And as you recall, that places 100% of the cost of wildfire property damage on a utility if its equipment caused the fire, regardless of fault, and without consideration of the contributing role of climate change, forest management, land use policies, or other factors. So neither AB 1054 nor AB 111 addressed this issue. However, there was discussion about it, so at least it's a step in a different direction. Also in May, we talked about the risk assessment as related to our insurance, and Larry here can update you on where we're going. Mr. Chapman, I'm sorry, can update you as to if anything has changed since May.
Hi, Larry.
Hi there, Larry Chapman, Risk Manager at DWP. And as you know, our renewal date for what's considered wildfire liability coverage was April 1st of this year. So our next renewal period doesn't begin again until April of next year, but we would start the process as early as September. And the early indications we've got is that insurers are still going to be looking for an increase in rate. And again, that's largely because they look at California as a wildfire risk, period. The number of incidents that's happened over the last 3 years, they haven't seen that come to a point where it's stabilized because they need something concrete to know what their potential liabilities are. The Wildfire Fund will help with that, but again, it only applies to those IOUs, and it still doesn't eliminate the risk of wildfires. So the preliminary indications we've got is from my broker is to expect at least a 10 to 20% increase, and because they're conservative, they say lean more toward the 20% side, and that would continue the trend we've seen of those wildfire insurance premium costs going up for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Hi, did you?
And Pijoy Chua is with our power system, if you had any questions about the actual, what might be contemplated in our wildfire plan going forward.
I only have 2 questions. So is that it for your presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's just get straight to it. Are any of our ratepayers, do they have to pay into this wildfire fund created by this legislation?
They do not.
They do not. Okay. And the other question I had, what else does this action in Sacramento mean for utilities like DWP?
I'm not really sure I understand the question. It's just basically, so now we all have to really contemplate, which I think we've been doing since the early 2000s, 2008 timeframe, wildfire mitigation plans.
Okay.
What are you doing to mitigate the level of harm, if you will, as it relates to wildfires? So as we mentioned in May, we inspect our facilities, we have vegetation management, et cetera. Now we're just going to codify, if you will, or demonstrate to others what we're doing, how we're doing it. They're going to review it and suggest if there are any holes in our plans.
And additionally, since we're not included in that wildfire fund, we as POUs, municipally owned folks, we have to think of alternative ways that we can make sure that we have sufficient assets to be able to cover any potential wildfire. We have the ability to do things that the IOUs don't, so that's kind of why they weren't thinking that it's something we needed to be included in. But DWP has been thinking on this issue. constantly, nonstop for the last year. So one of the mandates to our brokers is come back to us with multiple alternative financing techniques that we can look at and choose from and determine, is there something better we can be doing? Is there a way that we can achieve even greater protection without having to pay just more premium to get less insurance?
Great. Members, are there any questions? Yeah, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. When DWP submits their wildfire plan to the California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board, and if that plan is deemed insufficient, they then give suggestions on how to improve it, correct?
But before that, prior to
Yes.
it even going to to that advisory board, if you will, it has to go to our board. And then noted in a public hearing and as well as posted on our website.
Right. So, but once those steps occur, and then the approved report goes to the California board, and it's deemed insufficient, then they will give feedback on how, according to their perspective, it could be improved, correct?
Correct.
So what are the consequences? I'm not suggesting that we won't submit a report that is satisfactory, but what are the consequences if, no matter what we do, they're just not satisfied with the report that we submit? What happens then?
Let me actually go back just for a second and state that once the plan is crafted, it's reviewed, posted on the website, et cetera, there's actually another review, if you will. We're going to be hiring a third party to actually look at the plan also. So before it even goes to the state. So at that point, I think, and again, the entire goal here is for collaboration, and if they have suggestions or what have you, we would then take them into consideration and implement.
And this is new. It's a new process that no one's
Correct.
ever done. So it's just a matter of seeing how it goes.
Right, and it's not mandated, it's suggestions and
Right. Okay.
recommendations.
All right. Yeah. Because we are different than the other utilities, we have a little bit more freedom, it sounds like. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Kokori?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I think I've asked you this before and I don't recall the answer. Do the other major MOUs in California have the extent of transmission infrastructure that DWP does, that they own?
They have structure, but they may not have extensive structure as we do. For instance, there's someone like SMUT. They're a good-sized utility, but they haven't had any losses. So even though they're surrounded maybe by the other utilities that are involved in large losses, they haven't had any losses. So their risk profile and their risk structure is completely different. So they're looked at a little bit different than we are. But we actually have transmission utility equipment that spans through potentially 5 states. So
And we're the only municipally owned utility that has that, aren't we?
pretty much.
Okay. So I don't want to just think out loud with this, but if DWP is sort of uniquely situated in that way in the state, and we have a significantly increasing cost of risk because of the rising premiums and reduced coverage. At some point, there may come a time when we would want to look at whether it makes sense to continue to own and operate our own transmission lines, or whether a sale and leaseback or something like that might make more sense in order to reduce our own maintenance costs and offload our liability potential. I know that's kind of like way too big of a concept to even start discussing just off the top of our heads, but I think a number of years ago we had talked about the idea of potentially unloading the transmission network to other utilities, which I'm sure would be eager to grab it. Has that been anything that's been discussed or starting to be analyzed, or do you not want to talk about that?
I wouldn't even put PGI on the spot, and Louis Ting would die if I called him to the table, so I think we'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll just leave it at that for now. But the attractiveness of doing something like that seems to me to be increasing with the increase of our risk. and the increase of our cost. So, okay, we'll discuss that.
Well, now, the only thing I would say to that is that we know that's out there, but over the course of history, we really only had 2 wildfires that are reportable. So we would take a look at things like, does it make more sense for us? They've created a wildfire fund. Well, as a municipal, we have the ability to create a catastrophic self-insurance fund. Maybe that makes more sense than buying commercial insurance.
Maybe.
But that's one of the things that we're looking at to see if that makes sense, how would it work, and then how does it solve our problem. So we would look at things like that. I don't know, I can't address that issue you just discussed. That's something that should come from higher ups, but that is one of the things that we would add to the discussion.
Great. Thank you.
And Mr. Cook, I'm sorry, Mr. Collette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in our liability, if we had a set of wires that sparked a wildfire and it consumed the entire hillsides of Los Angeles and destroyed every home there, and we lost $15 to $20 billion, what would happen? Would DWP go bankrupt? Would the city go bankrupt? I'm assuming that our insurance only covers a capped amount that would be modest in comparison to that, but I don't know that for a fact.
Correct. We do not have $15 billion in insurance. At that point, a lot of that would depend on how that shook out, because there would be a lot of settlement and negotiations going on there to actually get to a number that hopefully would be something manageable. But if it was that amount, that is not something that we could cover. I don't know how it would work in terms of what's available through the general fund. I would leave that to others to answer. But from an insurance perspective, from all the modeling that we've done, we do not see that as our risk. Based on the history and based on some outside modeling we've done, we've been told that our risk profile is more in the area of a $46 million ultimate risk.
How much did you say?
46.
46 million?
Yes.
So that's assuming we wouldn't get blamed for a wildfire that consumed billions of dollars in homes.
Yes. And one of the reasons is one of the factors that go into putting our risk profile together is the fact that we are an urban landscape. And it's been well documented that the fire department does have a 3 to 5 minute response time. Even though you've seen where they've had challenges putting out fires, it still has never reached anything close to the $1 billion number that we're talking about now, because they do a good job of mobilizing enough to be able to contain that, so that we're not looking at something of that nature.
Well, they did a miraculous job in the case of the Skirball Bel Air fire, but we're assessing our risk at less than half the value of the most expensive one home in Bel Air. So we're presumably not assuming that we would ever get tagged with a responsibility for a fire that we started and be on the hook for all the homes that were consumed. Because if we were, just Bel Air potentially would be in the billions. With bad luck, it would be in the high billions, because there's so many homes of value there. And then if it jumped the freeway to Brentwood, I mean, you have a lot of valuable homes in the hills, and it sounds like we're not even considering the possibility that we could ever be blamed for it and be on the hook for it, in a way that Edison at least it's been talked about. I haven't followed that case closely to see what their responsibility wound up being. But it seems like one huge fire or 2 huge fires could take out a giant corporation like Southern California Edison if they had to be on the hook for it. I would think we could be in the same boat, and it doesn't sound like we've even looked at that possibility.
I'm not saying we haven't thought of such a thing, because, as you know, anything is possible, and that certainly is possible. But we're just going based off of what we have historically reviewed, what an outside party has reviewed for us, and we're not considered a major wildfire risk because of our urban landscape. And if a $1 billion fire did occur, yes, we would be in trouble.
So do we have any kind of internal modeling on what we do fiscally if such a thing happens? Or worse?
Well, yeah, I'm sure our CFO and others have looked at that, and I don't know whether, bonds could be an issue related to that. But, that's not something we've had to address yet. So I don't have the answer, but I do know someone within DWP would have that answer.
Well, maybe they could get back to me personally. I don't know if we'd want to put it on the record, but that's at least a conversation.
do
Yeah,
that.
definitely.
We could do
I'd like
that.
to have. And one other question. So I know we've had discussions and ordinances relating to our brush clearance policies in terms of the public. Is DWP operating under those as well? So when DWP does brush clearance, do they have a source to put out the fire should one arise from the brush clearance itself?
So we have a robust vegetation management program where we essentially make sure that we don't even get close to the clearance requirements. But we also have our crews trained that if there happens to be a fire when they're there, we have set protocols in terms of not only having fire extinguishers, but contacting the fire department. We have a direct line with LAFD.
Very good.
And in addition, in things such as our generation stations and those larger sites, every year we have an annual property loss survey done, and part of the question that occurs is that if there's a large fire here, what are the things available to the fire department to help put that out, whether they have enough water available, whether they have access to that water. Most of them have tanks that are filled with 100,000 gallons of water that can assist in that.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo, do you have any questions on this item? Very well. Colleagues, if there are no other further questions, I'd like for us to adopt this motion with the following instructions. Want to instruct DWP with the assistance of our ratepayer advocate to report on the impact this legislation has on utility credit ratings and insurance coverages and how that impacts DWP ratepayers. And I also want to instruct DWP to simultaneously transmit a copy of the wildlife mitigation plan to council once submitted to the California Wildfire Safety Advisory Board. Okay? Are there any objections, members? No. Seeing none, that would be the order. Thank you very much. Okay, you want to go ahead and read item 3 into
Certainly,
the
Madam Chair.
record, please?
Sir. Item number 3 relates to a motion Martinez-Smith relative to the PricewaterhouseCoopers litigation regarding faulty new billing system and the city's special counsel representation by Parity Law Group and the Inventor Utility Solutions contracts, provisions, funding expenditures to date, as well as the role of the reference legal matter. This matter was continued for your May 21st meeting as well.
Right. So, colleagues, we heard this item right before we went on summer recess, and since then a lot has happened. So let's go ahead and have DWP and city attorney staff come forward. So between the current and additional litigation and all the headlines about the federal authorities, I thought it was important for me that this council be fully up to speed on the current matters before DWP. And I'm going to ask the city attorney if you can please read the appropriate government code section so that we can go into closed session.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Jaborevich to read those.
At this point, I just want to get a clarification if you were going to recess for a special meeting or just...
This is part of our regular meeting. Our special meeting is after item number 3.
So at this point, we will recess in a closed session to address the items set for in item number 3 of the agenda, and in accordance with California Government Code Section 54957.1, we will report any final actions taken therein.
Thank you very much. Sergeants, can we please prepare the room for closed session? All right, we are now back in open session. So, Mr. Prieto, do you want to go ahead and why don't you report out any actions that were taken in closed session, I should say?
Certainly, Madam Chair, members, the action taken by the committee in closed session, here's the following conditions. CLA's office, with assistance of the CAO, ratepayer advocate, prepare a report that provides the following: a recap and timeline of actions taken with regards to billing system litigation, as well as cybersecurity services. Secondly, options to secure an independent review of DWP actions related to the billing system and cybersecurity contracts. Also associated with that, recommendations on requesting the use of outside counsel or the use of the attorney conflicts panel. And finally, the interim recommendations and best practices for safeguards on DWP contracting matters until current concerns and review are resolved. That finalizes the committee's action with regard to this matter.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, if there are no further questions, why don't we go ahead and adjourn our regular meeting and proceed with our special meeting? I believe we have speakers on this item as well.
Madam Chair, I'm going to need 1 minute. Close this. Okay.
He'll be called in second.
Hold on, Mr. Wilkins. I have not, but give me just a second. Having some technical.
Don't go far.
Don't go far, Tony. Don't go far. All right. So why don't we go ahead and call our special meeting to order? Do you want to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Martinez, Mr. Koretz, Mr. Krikorian, Mr. Seal, Mr. O'Farrell are present.
Okay. Thank you. And we've got 3 speaker cards on item number 1. Tony Wilkinson, are you? Yeah, there you are. Followed by Armando Herman and Wayne Spin. Good afternoon, Mr. Wilkinson.
Good afternoon. Thank you. You know, as we all, as a city, go through what we're all going through, I think this is actually an opportune time to have this particular recommendation for general manager come before you. 35 years in an institution, and with an understanding of the long-term needs of this institution. And I believe in absolute integrity in terms of being honest with you and other elected officials about the department's needs and until you make your final policy decisions. I think and I hope that this is a general manager that you will support and that can last, because this department truly needs stable leadership. I think he's absolutely the right person, and I hope you confirm the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. Armando Herman, followed by Wayne Spindler on item number 1. Get Mr. Herman, make your way up. Come on. Item number 1. Come on, let's get to it.
Him and H-Rag have problems mentally. So, you see, this is another Martin L. Adams, general manager for the Water and Power resolution, because they fired the other asshole who got in trouble with the Pricer issue. Something that we're all familiar with as of today. Hopefully you granted them that $1 billion settlement, Mr. Paul Budget Martin Krikorian, because a stupid fuck like you has to learn that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power has to have all financial disclosure statements ready, not pending, and a background check regarding the new engineer. I find offensive because you also have pending. I believe the FBI ought to do a pending investigation of whether or not this applicant is responsible and ready to accept the responsibilities.
Fuck you, Eric Garcetti.
Okay, next speaker.
So let's see. Financial disclosures not completed. Background check not completed. Community impact statements none submitted. It's all the fault of Paul Martin Krikorian.
hiring this fucking Martin Adams as a general manager from within. You have to go from outside to bring the new people inside. That's right. So there's only one man that can do this job, and that's Debbie Kim. Debbie Kim should be the new general manager of the DWP because she knows how to handle all of you stupid assholes and all of your fraud. But she's a really nice little girl, and she talks nice and soft. Finally, fuck you, Paul Krikorian.
That concludes public comment and general public comment for our special meeting. Let's go ahead and read item number 1 into the record, Mr. Prieto.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Board of Water and Power Commissioners report and resolution relative to the appointment of Martin L. Adams as General Manager and Chief Engineer of the Department of Water and Power.
Okay, Mr. Marty Adam, you're up. First of all, before we begin, Marty, I just want to go ahead and thank you for your 35 years of service at DWP. I think the significance of that should not be lost. But I know we're facing trying times at DWP. I wish this were more of a celebratory hearing, but it isn't. And we need to understand what we should expect from you as you lead the department. So why don't we get to it? I have a few questions for you, and then I can have my colleagues go ahead and ask their questions as well. So you just got appointed by the board. But what have you done to date to address all the questions and the concerns and the uncertainty at DWP? And what do you plan to do to maintain and restore our public trust over the department?
So it was an interesting week, 2 weeks ago, when the board put me in as the interim general manager. One of the most important things that I realize is that while the public may see the investigation going on and the FBI, in terms of the department itself, it's a very...
Can you just a second? You know what, Mr. Herman, Mr. Spindler? I instructed you not to interrupt this meeting. You continue to disrupt. You were warned. Can you please ask them to leave, sergeants?
Yep.
I want the record to reflect that Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler continued to disrupt this meeting after they were asked not to. They continue to talk, act up, whatever you want to call that. It's all being done. Thank you very much. Sorry about that, Mr. Adams.
It's all right.
Thank you.
I don't envy
Thank
you.
you very much. Why don't you just continue on?
So one of those things that, I recognize that we have a big problem, a big image issue, but at the same time, there's 10,000 other employees at the Department of Water and Power that have nothing to do with any of this, and they're the ones that are delivering water and power and making sure that we serve our ratepayers on a daily basis. So the first thing that struck me is that we need to be able to continue doing our business, which I believe we do very well, and make sure that people are able to stay focused. We did have some management changes that I made on the day of the board meeting, and so we had a few folks that had left the organization that day. I immediately put all the working groups under either myself or one of the 3 senior assistant general managers, who collectively, between us, we have 150, 160 years of experience or something like that. People who are my right hands to manage the department. So I did that so that everyone would have a good direct report structure, and the hierarchy would be maintained, and we had people with a lot of experience managing all the functions with oversight while we worked to reconstruct what the new management team will look like. So that's the first thing I did, particularly in this area where we have a lot of challenges and the questions about cybersecurity and such. we had decentralized a lot of our IT structure over the last 6 or 8 months. And so I worked to reconsolidate that under Louis Carr, who was hired to be our director of IT, who was hired from Las Vegas, Valley Water Authority, and prior to that he worked at a utility in Texas. I have confidence in Louis that he's going to be able to bring everything together so that we have some commonality and don't have 4 or 5 different chiefs each working in their own silo. And so I worked to bring that together at the same time. I also have instituted some changes in terms of hiring to make sure that management level hiring or positions are being reviewed by me before we hire, because I want to make sure that our future structure looks like what I believe the department should look like to be effective. I think we were getting a little top heavy at the time, and so I'm looking to streamline that to make sure that we're functioning effectively and efficiently, and also looking to create a greater bench of experts in the IT area, make sure that we have some people to call on who can give us more expert advice on an immediate basis to deal with some of the initial problems. Most of the employees are, I believe, fairly excited at this time. They're looking forward to having someone that they've known for their careers growing up in the department. They're excited about tackling the challenges that are ahead of us. We have great challenges on the power side and the water side, and I think folks are really determined that they want to do the best job they can, and it's my goal to make them be able to do that and facilitate that in any way that I can. Folks want to do a great job. I think the department's a great organization, a great agency. We need to remind ourselves that, and then we need to earn that trust and that reputation back from the city and its residents as well.
Right. You know, the other question I had, so what is the significance of a chief engineer designation in part of your job title? Because no other general manager has carried that.
This
so
was of interest.
Explain yourself.
This was of interest to me. Originally, the department was always the general manager, going back perhaps forever, always had to be an engineer. And when I started, the general manager, I was general manager and chief engineer. And that was changed, I believe, when Bill McCarley took over. They actually had to change the city charter so that it no longer had to be an engineer. And so the charter does read that the official title is general manager. But I asked that the original working title, be restored. It meant a lot to me personally. I believe it means a lot to folks in the department. It does also, kind of resonate the fact that the department is a very technical organization, and no matter how much we do for customer service or billing or other issues, at the end of the day, it takes a lot of technology to deliver water and power services to the city. And so I think that the concept of chief engineer reminds us that it's a very technical business by its nature, and that we always have to be mindful of that as we blaze forward into the future, that we have to manage and harness technology so that we can continue to serve the public.
Mm-hmm. Members, do you have any questions of Mr. Adams? Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marty, and congratulations. So,
thank you.
I've known you for many, many years, and I've seen you in action. I've traveled with you up the state to review all of the sites and locations of the whole sort of water and power generation that leads to our existing as a city.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen you as a bridge builder, as a problem solver, as someone who can relate to people, everyday people in public meetings, et cetera, answer really tough questions, handle really tough crowds, and help solve some significant problems. And so the one question I have for you is, in your 35 years, virtually everyone in the department probably knows you. Every last 10,000 employee probably knows you. If not personally, then close to personally. We haven't really had a general manager or chief engineer that quite has your experience. In my existence in the last 17, 18 years, in my capacity working in the city. Clearly, you bring an added value with that world of experience. So my question to you would be, how does that set you apart as as a general manager nominee for the Department of Water and Power, how would you articulate those strengths, how they would help you in this leadership role?
I thought you were going to try to stump me, but that one I can answer. So, I think that coming from the inside is a tremendous advantage because, and as you know, it's difficult to know how to work in the city itself. And then within the city, you have the Department of Water and Power, which has its own subculture, and I've heard folks describe it as one of the more difficult places to manage. And I've seen the struggles of folks coming in from the outside, where you have to learn the people, you have to learn the culture, and you have to sift through when you're hearing things, whether those are good ideas or bad ideas or self-serving ideas, or things that don't go well because we've known from experience. So in 35 years, I have a tremendous sense for what does work, things that we've tried that don't work. I have a great sense for the people that surround me and people's capabilities and what drives them. I spent about 16 years of my career in operations, and so I have a very strong sense of what it takes to actually make things work in the field and what makes our guys in the field tick and how we affect positively or negatively their jobs. And so I think that insider knowledge is a distinct advantage. And one of the things one thing I know is that when I watched Dave Wright come in and some of the team that he brought in come in, is that folks would always say, well, we should do this and we should do this, but when I'd find out, I'd try to intervene because nobody ever tells me that because I know better. And so there's a sense of being able to know better and know just really what makes us tick and what'll be successful, I think is a real strategic advantage that I have at this point. And my heart and soul in the department for 35 years, this has been my life. And so I am as invested in its success and in the success of our employees, which consequently then becomes the success of the city as anybody. And so to me, this is, I take my success or failure to be critical to what we do as a company, and for me, we either win together or we lose together, and it's a team approach. And so it's nice to be a chance to be the team captain, but I feel like a player captain in some ways. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, congratulations.
Thank you.
I think, I'm not so sure, but at least it's good for us to have you in the right position, and we appreciate it. I've worked closely with you for a number of years, especially when I was on MWD board, and we worked together on a lot of water issues. Mm-hmm. And having watched the MWD, I think their strategic water policy is pray for snow. I don't think that's a very effective policy. Do you envision us having a better policy for our water and our electric security, especially as we expect to add 1 million people by 2050 or 2060, and climate change we expect will continue to worsen?
I think that if you look historically, Department of Water and Power has been really core to the city's ability to grow and to survive. And the decision by the city to have its own utility owned by the city has really made a huge difference in how we've been able to thrive. I believe that our importance moving forward, as you mentioned, is every bit as critical as what it was historically 100 plus years ago when we were part and parcel, building the LA Aqueduct and creating a power system, to the city actually growing from what it was back in the early 1900s to what it is today. I think when we look ahead, the mayor's asked us to look really hard at not needing and not relying so much on imported water resources, because we've learned through the drought that water resources that are imported are there sometimes, but not all the time. And so while they're an important part of the mix, being wholly dependent on them for so much of our water supply is a failed policy going forward. And so we have plans to get to about 70% of our local water supply, of our water supply generated locally by 2035, which is an ambitious but very possible goal. and with things such as Measure W, and to make better use of stormwater, or work with LA Sanitation to do more water recycling, both at Hyperion and Tillman plant in the valley. The institution of what's going to be the world's largest groundwater cleanup project in the San Fernando Valley. These are things that are critical to the city's water future and its water independence. And I believe wholeheartedly that we'll get there, and we'll be able to get there without breaking the bank, because we've already picked all the low-hanging fruit. Now it's a matter of picking the right ones further up the tree. On the power side, we have tremendous challenges. The mayor's goals for the city align with the laws of the state of California. We know that on the schedule we're on is going to put us in a leadership position. I'm very well aware that besides being in your leadership position, we have a very strong obligation to set a good example and to be successful. If we fail at what we're doing, it's going to be hard to convince the rest of the state or the country or the world that there are things that can be done to change the energy industry and to reduce impacts on the climate. So we have to succeed, and we have to succeed in a very smart way. And so one of the things that I'm really engaging right now is how are we planning that path forward, making sure that everybody is in alignment. There's clearly differences of opinion right now as to how we ought to proceed. There's always a concern of how do you the end goal is clear. How you get there is the entire battle, and how much it's going to cost to get there and do it in a meaningful and intentional way. So we need to get everyone on the same page so we're not wasting time or energy or money, and we're pulling together. But I believe we'll get there. I believe we'll be to where we need to be. We'll have much more energy independence and water independence, and we'll be able to handle electrification of the transportation grid, electrification, if I can say it, of housing stock and building structures. But we have to do it in a way that's not going to hurt the folks that have to pay the bills. And so I'm very cognizant of that. I recognized early on that when this happened, if I can go back to a little story. One time I was giving a talk out in the valley, and people were asking for 1 million different rebates for water. It was at the Valley College. And why can't we rebate this and rebate that? And I finally said, we rebate things that make sense financially. So let me remind you, I said, we don't have money. I said, I don't have any money. I said, I only have your money. And you want me to do smart things with your money, because people think it's just like with the class action settlement. We don't have a pool of money that belongs to the Department of Water and Power. We only have what our ratepayers entrust to us. So we have to do the best job we can with that. And so that's every bit as critical as how we handle that responsibility as we move forward to our future water and power supplies.
Let me ask you another question. We seem to have some rough edges in our relationship with our DWP union and our brothers and sisters in labor relating to environmental issues. It seems like they object to our converting our coastal gas plants to alternative energy sources. They have questions about the Green New Deal and whether we can possibly convert those jobs and retrain people. And they're actually picketing the city at events over the Green New Deal.
I've been there.
What do we see as a way to bridge that gap and handle both our environmental needs and our needs with our labor partners?
I think the only way to do this is to do it together, and I think that's what we need to do, and it's what I intend to do. Our workforce is highly skilled, and is probably amongst the best workforces in the utility industry, and we appreciate that, and we appreciate the expertise that they have and the experience they have. And so my goal is to pull on that expertise and experience and engage with the labor union as we work toward the future. I think that they are strong partners because they've done a lot of things over the course of history to defend the department and defend the city, to make sure that legislation hasn't been done that would harm the city in the past. Things to make sure that we move forward meaningfully. I think that there's no doubt to where the state's going, to where the climate's going, and what we need to do. I think that there's a desire to partner together and get there together, so we all have the same roadmap and the same path. And that's my plan, is to do that, because I think that's the only way we get to where we need to be in the future, and that's to do it together. We've never done well working apart. And so the only way we're going to conquer the challenges we have is if we're all pulling in the same direction. And to get that, we're going to have some good dialogue and some good debates and really develop a common mindset. And I think we can get to that point.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo?
I don't think the unions have any problem with the new Green Deal. I think their problem is with unemployment, unanticipated unemployment, or being unemployed as a byproduct of the new Green Deal. And I think that's the rub. And so you just talked about the need to work together and the importance of that. My question is, how do you plan to do that? And so those are my questions. I agree with you, and we're very fortunate to be able to benefit from your tremendous history in the department. But my question is, how do you plan to do that? We've had this conversation earlier in my office, and I appreciated that. And I also have the same question with respect to the question of diversity, particularly part of your leadership team. How do you plan to make sure that there's diversity in the leadership of this most important department that reflects the talent and the wealth of the diversity that exists in the city? We frequently talk about diversity being our strength. You hear the mayor say it. We're constantly singing that chorus. But how do you plan? What actions will you take to demonstrate that?
Okay. So first, I believe I have a good working relationship with the union and the union leadership. I know that there are other senior managers that have equally as strong a relationship. And I think it starts at the top, and it's going to start, to me, with a very small group of people just having an open discussion, and something that maybe has not had a chance to take place yet. And so that's my plan, my goal. I think that the leadership of the department, leadership of the union need to come together before we can bring the masses together. And so I think that would be my plan, is to sit down, and it will not be an overnight thing. It'll take some time, but I think the advantage is there's trust. There's things that the department management and the union management and leadership do together already. Everything. I was going to mention the trust, but I know everybody likes that subject. But there's a tremendous example of working together to get things done, and we do have a very strong record of successfully working together, and a lot of that is built on the feeling that we're pulling in the same direction. I think, having been there for 35 years, I was Engineering and Architects Association, so I was before the merger with IBEW. So I was never an IBEW member, but where somebody in an entry-level engineering job is at this point. But the managers, by and large, came from the union or the unions at the time. And so our interests are the same. Our interests are very much aligned. I have never for a second doubted that the labor union isn't all about the department doing a good job, its employees doing a good job, and the city thriving. I think we don't always have the same approach to that, but I have no question in my mind that we don't have the same end goals. So we just have to get together and decide how we're going to work on that together moving forward. In regard to the second question, I came from a system that had a very diverse leadership structure, and it was something I kind of grew up with in the water system. I think it's very important that the leadership of the department, just like its employees, reflect the population of Los Angeles. And so it'd be my goal that as I establish my management team, that I do the same thing. And so I think it's we have a very diverse employee structure, but not every classification is very well balanced. There's not many women in the trades. We're working on that. There's an interesting mix from different cultural minority backgrounds. Not exactly, if you look at total number of people, it's not too far off. If you're looking at what kind of jobs and opportunities, it's not well balanced. And that's something that we need to work on. But also, I think that having a management team that reflects that is an important message to everybody following down below, and the supervisors and such.
Mr. Farrow is here with us, and I also sit as chair of housing, Mr. Farrow, chair of homelessness. One of the challenges for us is finding land for us to build. DWP has a large amount of real estate assets. And so I want to know, can we look forward to working with you in terms of both, one, the inventory, and two, engaging with your department in terms of land swaps or reuse or redesign in terms of the incredible amount of real estate that you guys have. I find it impossible that the city should continue to have flat surface parking lots, for example, and that we're storing vehicles in a flat surface parking lot when we have people sleeping on the streets. To me, it just seems unacceptable and incomprehensible. Can we talk to me about what we can look forward to from you and your department?
We have offered a number of properties to be considered for, at least for the bridge housing project, initially. The city, I know, has properties not just from Water and Power, but also from other city departments and other parcels that they're looking at. We do come up with new ideas on properties that can be available. I think the parking is a very interesting issue. Matter of fact, Councilman Koretz and I just had this conversation a couple of days ago about if we were to consolidate parking in a more efficient manner, how much property could be gained. So I will give you the caveat that yard space for construction is at a premium. And one of the things we find is like our yards downtown are now in prime real estate area. And we have yards both for Water and Power that are located throughout the city serving different districts. And of course, with the amount of infrastructure replacement, the amount of equipment and crews and materials that we have to have is got us bursting at the seams. So there is a little yin and yang going back and forth between how much space we need to perform our function and renew our infrastructure, but at the same time look at properties that we're not using, because a small property doesn't necessarily help us from a yard space, but it may help us from a housing space. That said, we're also looking at opportunities to create more open space on department property for the public to enjoy, because there's a lot of places in the city that there is no open space available, and some of the only land that's available is owned by the Department of Water and Power. So we are working on those sorts of things. For instance, Ascot Reservoir is largely a park area now. Now, if we looked at it today, would it be all park area? Would we maybe make some housing in there? It could be considered, but we are looking to be as creative as possible with the use of our property, so that's a benefit not just to Water and Power, but a benefit to the city as a whole.
Thank you.
Mr. Kokorin, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. And it's going to be minimal, because I think in the time that I've been on the council, I've only been here for 9 years. I think you would be my 8th general manager, I think, something like that. I think we're 9 or 10 in the last 12 years, so something like that.
Hopefully your last.
And each one has had their unique skill set, but I don't think any of them have the whole package in the way that you do. And I am delighted that you've been appointed to this position. It's about time, after a lot of floundering around with leadership that didn't bring stability to this department. It's about time that we turned to one of the rocks of this department, and I think of you that way, and I think you're going to do a terrific job.
Well, thank you.
And you have my full support. I just did want to reflect on one specific thing, because it kind of relates to both Mr. Kretz's and Mr. Cedillo's questions about this ongoing challenge that we have between labor interests and environmental interests. And I don't think it is as simple as saying just that, labor has no problem with the Green New Deal, they just don't want to lose their jobs. Because when we make a decision, for example, not to repower a gas-fired power plant, that doesn't imply that anyone is going to lose their jobs. Some of those people may work in different classifications and so on, but changing policy about this does not lead to wholesale firing of people from the department. They just may need to learn different skills within the department. But part of the problem comes from, and the reason that people's heads explode over this, is because nobody knows what to expect. Green New Deal is an expression that has no meaning. It is a Humpty Dumpty phrase that means exactly what I choose it to mean. So anybody who uses that phrase can be the fill-in for whatever it is that they think that it should mean. And until we have a specific blueprint in place to get to zero carbon emissions in the generation of electricity in this department. Nobody is going to know what any of that stuff means, and they're going to fill in the blanks with either their wish list or their horror stories, whichever, depending on the context. So that being said, when can we expect to be able to come back? When will the department be prepared to come back with the NREL modeling, with the range of options that we have, with the policy decisions that the council will have to make with the board to get us to zero carbon emission electricity? When will we have the result of that work product that we've been working on for a couple of years now?
Yeah, so, and you're right, we have been working for a couple of years on that product, which has changed a little bit with the new direction. So we have the study looking at our generation, what 100% renewable generation looks like. We also have the study about transmission, which is the real question, because it's not generating the energy, it's how you move from place to place to make sure that everybody has enough all the time, and how you handle different kinds of outages. So those studies are going to take a number of months still. The one thing that I am sworn that I'm going to take care of is to make sure that as we move those studies forward, that we have operating personnel in the room that are talking about how the system really works and what they have to make the system work and function properly. There's a lot of policy ideas, which are great, but policy doesn't run a power system. And so we are going to make sure that the people who have to sit up all night long in the middle of the night and push a button or read a gauge and make a decision or change something on the computer or call crews out, that those people have a system that will work for them, that will actually deliver electricity. And so but I think that with a common goal, we can build that system, but we will build it with the people who are actually going to be running it as part of the solution. And I think, so I think that's an important piece.
And the people who are paying for it, by the way, too. And the people who are paying for it as well.
Absolutely. In regard to your comment about being some of the conflict being about more than just jobs, I think it is more than just jobs. And we have to remember that the labor union was instrumental in making sure that we did not get deregulated. They're instrumental in making sure that we had once through cooling dates that we could live with. They've done a lot to protect the city over the years, and I think they have a genuine interest in us being successful. It's not about jobs, dues, or anything else. It's about us doing what we're supposed to do, and they are a huge part of our success and how this agency runs, and they've done things very overtly to make sure that we are able to be successful in doing our job. So I think it's not just jobs and dollars, it's ideology, and I think that in that sense, when someone's that determined to make sure that everything works correctly in the future, it's our obligation to make sure that we're engaging so that we have all the right answers. But I do think that pulling together, that we will have the right answers, we'll get exactly where we need to be. And I think we can do it in a very good way.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions, members? All right, Marty, well, we both have high hopes and high expectations for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to recommend that this committee approve your appointment as the general manager and chief engineer of the Department of Water and Power. There are no objections. That will be the order, and we'll see you in council. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, members, there is no other business before us, so I move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.